someone had asked me, what was the toughest decision I've ever had to make in my career? And it actually took me a while to think of the toughest decision. Because my career has really been broken up into 3 sections, right? Section number 1 is when I was really learning everything, right? That was the first 10 years of my career, me working in manufacturers, working for the end users. I had this whole strategic plan, where I developed a strategic plan, right, that I executed for over a 10-year period. The second phase of my career was working for systems integrators, so working for other integrators. And I worked for 2 different systems integrators, both top integrators in the world. And then the third phase has been my entrepreneurial phase, where I created my own integrator, created my own data science companies, the 48 firms now that I own. So what I decided to do was to shoot this video in 3 parts, right? Part number 1, which I'll do today, is, the 3 toughest decisions I had to make in that first phase of my career, right? So, So a little background before I answer the 3 questions. So starting in 1999, 2000, I got my first job working in manufacturing. And I started as a laborer. If you guys want to know like my whole story, how did I get into industrial automation? Because at the time I only had a degree in sociology. I was not a double E at that point. There's another video, it's where I talk about the arc of my career, right? But basically, in the first 10 years of my career, I worked for 4 different types of manufacturers. So I worked in the mining industry first, then I worked in the printing industry, then I worked in the steel industry, and then I worked in Tier 1 automotive. The first part of my career, I did 5 years in mining, 5.5, I think. Then I did 2 years in printing. I did 2 years, maybe 3 years in steel, and I did 1.5 years in Tier 1 automotive. So the 3 toughest decisions I had to make while I was in that first phase when I worked for manufacturers, the first toughest decision I had to make was at the end of my, the decision I had to make to leave mining, leave my employer in the mine, and go work on surface. Okay, so, and believe me, that was a excruciatingly difficult decision, because that was my first real job where I started paying for my student loans. I had gotten married while I worked in the mine. I'd gone back and gotten another degree while I worked in the mine. And I had my first child while I worked in the mine. Bought a house, so I had a family to take care of. I'm 29 years old, and I've been working in the mine for 5 years. I've been systematically promoted. I'm working as I'm technically an electrician in the maintenance department. And I made really good money, especially for the area I lived in. I made exceptional money. I was known as the SMAG guru, so in terms of like bleeding edge technology, I was that guy, and that's what I was known for. They called me the SMAG guy in the mine. I was respected, I made good money, and I had a lot of responsibility. I knew that in order for me to truly have the type of career I wanted, that is one where I made a real difference, not just for my employer, but like in the world, help save and create middle-class jobs, to have a positive impact bigger than just the manufacturer I worked at, I had to leave. the mine. I was going to have to leave. And part of that has to do with when you work in mining. Mining is a world all unto itself. It has its own regulatory bodies. So, OSHA doesn't even govern mining safety. They have their own safety body called MSHA, the Mining Safety and Health Association, I think is what it's called. I was a member of the mine rescue team. I was on our behavioral sciences technology safety team on the actual steering committee. Mining is a small community. It's a family. Everything I knew about my career was tied up working for that company. And the company I worked for was a great company. The largest privately held company in the world. Just a great company. But I knew that if I wanted to have a bigger impact, I needed to go on to surface and learn all the, get experience in surface technologies, right? And my goal at the time had been to get moved into systems integration so that I could, instead of me being able to make a difference with one manufacturer, I can make a difference with many. When you work in systems integration, you're not just working with one manufacturer, you're working with many. So I sat down with my wife and I told her, hey, I need to get a job on surface. And that actually was hard. When you were, again, all my experience was in mining. It didn't matter, and I had two undergraduate degrees at this point. I didn't want to relocate. I just bought my home. So this was another thing. I was in an area that didn't have a lot of jobs. If you guys want to see my feelings on that about, upstate New York and the mass exodus of manufacturing. So I started applying for positions and I wasn't getting anything. And it all had to do with the fact that there weren't a lot of manufacturing jobs. There were lots of people who wanted those manufacturing jobs because they're the good paying middle class jobs. And I was already working in a mine, right? And all my experience was in a mine. So I made the decision with my wife to leave the mine without a job and go to a temp agency and get the temp agency to just get me surface experience, any experience not working in a mine. And so I did that. In 2005, I left. I went to a temp agency. And I did 3 jobs over the course of 1 year working for a temp agency. The first position was doing data mining for a company that was building websites for like scholastic lacrosse teams. So I had to learn, I basically wrote a Python scrubber that mined data for the names of the coaches and the teams all over the United States that they would sell their services to. And I did that for about 3 months. Then I got, when that assignment was done, I got a position working for a biosciences firm, building a controller for a robot a mass spectrometer that was on the end of a robot. Okay, and so this was my only experience in life sciences, actually. And this company was affiliated with Cornell University, and I did that for about 6 months. Actually, a little longer than that. I think I did it about 9 months. And at the same time, I got a part-time position so that I could augment the income that I was making building these controllers. At night, I worked in a skilled nursing unit for a continuous care community for the elderly. And I just did filing, right? So I'd work a full shift during the day building these controllers. One of the biggest advantages of that job was that I worked right next to the lab. And so I could see how this mass spectrometer was being used in a life sciences environment. Meanwhile, the whole time I'm applying for, surface positions, and I finally get an offer from a printing company, and so I took that position with this printing company as a controls technician, and then got promoted into an engineering position. So number one, that was the first toughest decision I had to make, was that move. The decision I had to make to leave the mine, because I was turning away stable income. My whole reputation was tied up in that organization. I was somebody. My relationships, everything was tied up in that organization. And that was a tough decision. And I see why it is that people don't, most people, they stay where they are, because the truth is leaving is really difficult. And I recognize not everyone's going to make the decision to leave. The second toughest decision that I had to make in that first 10-year window in my career was the decision to stand up for one of my colleagues. So when I worked for the printing company, that company had just come out of bankruptcy and had been hired by some former presidents, and they were just basically standing the company up. I was the first person in my position. One of the first things I did while I was there was I built enterprise class SCADA system that gave us full visibility into the operation of the entire facility. That is the current state of the art department, printing department, binding, stitching, including which work orders were being run, which products were being run on any of the given assets. And then the second thing I did was I tied that into the business systems downstairs. I worked for the guy that I reported to was the engineering manager, who also happened to be the IT manager. That's how consolidated this organization was. So it was a really unique opportunity. Worked with great people. That was when I worked with this guy named Lenny Rosenfield, who to this day is the most gifted engineer I've ever worked with in my whole career. He had something like 40 years of experience. Super brilliant guy, incredibly well read. I learned from Lenny like the importance of being well read, like continuously studying your craft in your spare time. But there was another guy who was Lenny's counterpart. He was the mechanical engineer, and I cannot remember his name for the life of me. I wish I could. I know he was a single dad raising his 3 daughters by himself. Super, super nice guy, like just the nicest guy in the world, but not the kind of guy who's going to stand up for himself. And so we were in it. About a year into my employment there, maybe a year and a half, we got a new operations manager who had worked for the company that had filed for went bankrupt. Didn't have a good reputation. Real like ball buster guy, unfair, highly political, blah blah blah. And we were in an engineering meeting, and he was unfair to this one colleague, basically throwing him under the bus to, cast shade on him to protect himself. And I remember thinking, I went home that night and told my wife, I didn't feel right that I didn't speak up. I'm the guy who runs into fires when other people run away. And I talked to my wife and I said, if he does that again, I need to defend him, right? I knew that it could cost me my job if I did speak up. But I decided to do that anyway. And not even 2 weeks later, same situation happens. There's some issue with, some reducer that didn't get changed on one of the printing presses in the right amount of time. the part was missing. The reason the part was missing was because, this operations manager had, changed the replenishment value in inventory for that specific part, but he wanted to deflect, and he blamed this engineer, and he was really not fair. I mean, it just wasn't fair to the guy, and was trying to humiliate him, actually, which was weird because there was no value in humiliating him in that situation. The guy hadn't done anything wrong, and then I spoke up, and I knew that, and I let him have it. I said, you show your ignorance with the way you're behaving right now, and it doesn't matter what your role is. You have a moral responsibility to treat these guys with respect unless they've earned the disrespect that you want to give to them. And he told me to shut up, and I quit on the spot right there. Like, I said, I'm out. And good luck supporting the systems that I've built for you. So that was the second most difficult. The reason I did that was because I had a close relationship with the president, and the president did try to get me to come back. But ultimately the president his hand was forced, and he had to let this operations guy go. And eventually he did, I think 6 weeks later or whatever. And they tried to get me to come back. But what I did was I fell on the sword to protect a colleague who couldn't defend himself. And then the third most difficult situation was after there, I went and moved into the steel industry. I got, timing just worked out perfectly. They had already called me and had heard about me at my previous stop. There was a guy who, his brother worked in the mine, who worked in the steel plant, and they knew about me then, and they were looking for someone to build a enterprise class supervisor control data acquisition system, but also to do version control for PLC programming and using Factory Talk Asset Center and this whole, and that was going to include all the facilities on the East Coast, including their Darlington location, and so they heard about me and they reached out to me. I interviewed for the position, and I went to go work for the steel company, and I was there. I want to say I was there 3 years. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember if I was there for 2 years or for 3 years, but I think it was 2 years, 2.5, something like that. The difficult decision was I made a lot of money there, and I did a couple of projects that really put my name on the map. First off, I did the full site-wise SCADA system, so that I put in all the cameras. So I gave us 100% camera visibility to our process. So from melt shop all the way through reheat oven, through the rolling mill, down into the stacker, into the warehouse, 100% coverage, so that we could correlate digital results that we saw in the SCADA system and in the historian we could go back and watch the tape, right? So I had done a couple of really major projects for them, and I was just starting to work with the facility in Darlington on doing the exact same thing for them, Darlington, South Carolina. And an opportunity came up for a full-time engineering position for a tier 1 automotive company. The problem is I made a lot of money in this steel company because of the way we were compensated. We every manufacturing employee got a piece of the production that happened during the week that they were working. So I was going to take a 50% pay cut to make this move. And again, now I've got a second. My wife and I had another baby. I'm the breadwinner in my family, but truth be told, I sat down with my wife. I talked to her about it. I said, this is the last step. This is the last job I need to take before I can move into systems integration, and or before I can move into systems integration, and I knew that I would be like the asset for a systems integrator, because I had worked for 4 different manufacturers in 4 completely different processes using 4 completely different control schemas and theories. And my wife supported me to do that. But I mean, I lost sleep. I mean, yeah, it took me a couple of weeks to make the decision to make this jump, because my salary went from, you know, a big 6-figure salary to, you know, 68.5 or something. I mean, it was a huge pay cut that I took. But it was worth it. And I was there for a year and a half, 2 years. And truth be told, I learned basically everything I needed to learn. I had co-ops with me there, so I got lucky. And so I was able to build in like 8 months, I was able to build a full site-wise, so this was multi-campus, full site-wise SCADA and MES system for this manufacturer in half the time that it had ever taken before. So we did business system integration. And so once I got to the point where I had learned everything I was going to learn, then I made my jump to systems integration. And that's when we decided to relocate from upstate New York back to Dallas, which is where I'm from, and got my first job in systems integration. And in the next video, I'll talk about the 3 toughest decisions I had to make while I was in a systems integrator. So when I worked for two other integrators. Hopefully that's helpful. I get that question a lot, actually, like toughest decisions I've had to make. Obviously the audience here is those who are probably trying to make the decision whether or not they should jump for a different outfit or whatever. But hopefully that was helpful. If it was, please share the video. Be really helpful if you comment down below. It really helps with the algorithm. It gets the message out to more people. And if you like the video, that's great. And still, it's about 50% of the people who watch our videos haven't subscribed. So please subscribe if you haven't. And I'll see you in the next one.